Hi, my name is Niku Darafshi, and I'm so excited to talk to you about my experience at the Aga Khan Museum. I originally heard about this opportunity when I was taking a photography of the Middle East class in my sophomore year. And I was incredibly out of my comfort zone in this class, coming from a science background, but I also am Persian. And so this class was a cool way to kind of get some of my Division 1 art classes out of the way while also learning a little bit about my background and the history of photography. So in this class, for my final research project, I looked into the history of photography in Iran and how the Qajar dynasty utilized this tool of photography to kind of bring Western ideas to Iran and kind of transform the traditions of that time and place. And when I heard about this opportunity to continue this study that I was doing at the Aga Khan Museum, I jumped on it. So I was super lucky to know that the museum was having an exhibit that included a lot of artifacts and pieces from this Qajar dynasty that I had just been briefly studying in my class. And so I had the opportunity to not just study these things from Williamstown, but to go to this museum and see these pieces in person, in my hands, right in front of me, and to work with experts who had spent months and even years acquiring these pieces and researching them so that they can be presented to the greater Toronto community. So I took the leap of faith and went out to Toronto, and I continued the research question that I had in Williamstown, kind of looking at photography and that 19th century period in Iran and how art was transforming at that time using these new tools like photography. So I continued that research, but at the same time, I was able to learn about all the different facets of museum work that make a museum run. So not only was I working under the amazing curatorial team, kind of learning the research skills about like where does art come from, how do we get it into the door, but also how do we translate it into ways that people young and old can understand. How do we work through legal processes to make sure that the art we are acquiring is ethical and that it comes from equitable places, and also how do we engage with people who don't usually come to museums, and how do we put this art into perspective with other pieces not in these special exhibits. So it was a very cool experience, in that I had never really thought about all the little details that go into making a museum run and getting these special exhibits to come together. So that was really cool in that I wasn't just kind of learning research skills and answering these questions that I cared about, but also learning about all the different aspects of a museum and how this special museum in Toronto could operate. I also just loved that I got to spend a month at this museum that was completely centered around Middle Eastern art. As I said before, both of my parents are from Iran, and growing up in Williamstown as a kid, there wasn't a lot of like Middle Eastern representation in the museums and in the sorts of things I was learning. So it was very refreshing to go to this museum that solely dedicated its time and space to kind of bringing these Middle Eastern art forms together in one place. So that was really cool to see not just Persian art, but how that connected to different parts of the that sort of space. So I really love that as well, and it kind of helped me kind of love my background more and kind of explore the different identities that I have as well. Um, I did not expect to go do this winter study. I was declaring my major as a geoscience like person, so I was very Division 3 science nerd. Really like kind of took a leap of faith taking art history classes and doing this winter study, but I quickly realized that the experience I had at the Aga Khan Museum was super influential for what I would kind of do after the museum winter study experience ended. So there was a really cool opportunity to do archival work right after I got back. So a professor in the geoscience department found a human skull, and knowing that I had just come from this winter study experience working in a museum, she kind of tasked me with kind of doing background research, carbon dating, looking into archives to figure out where this skull came from and how can we equitably handle this piece and or return it back to where it belongs. So even though I was a geoscience major doing research kind of on the natural environment, I got to use the research skills that I learned in this museum to figure out where this skull was from and make a plan for how we could kind of return it to its rightful place. I also kind of just started to love diving into the Middle East culture and use my experience at the Aga Khan Museum to then continue to take more Middle Eastern classes, both at Williams and abroad. So I was able to go study the Farsi language, which I saw in a lot of art pieces, but couldn't really read or understand. So I got to go to Tajikistan and study the Farsi language and really hone my reading and writing skills so I could then kind of do more research and better understand the pieces of art that I was seeing in my day-to-day life. And then I also was able to take more Farsi classes at Williams and kind of bring that language so more people could kind of take those classes as well, who are also interested in the Iranian diaspora. I honestly would recommend this program to so many different types of people. I loved living in the city of Toronto for a month. It has incredible food, museums, the downtown is so much fun. And I just really loved getting to go outside of Williamstown for one short month. And I found that it was a really great time to kind of explore a new environment, but also kind of come back after that program and kind of feel fulfilled. So I really loved getting to go there, and I appreciated all the people that worked at the museum and everyone at Williams who kind of helped me before and after get there. But not being an art historian myself, I definitely didn't come into this experience the most experienced person in the room, but I learned so much, and people were so willing to help me kind of shape this program into what I wanted it to be, not just this research question, but kind of better understanding my background and my identity and making some really cool connections along the way. And I still check in on the Aga Khan Museum and see what sorts of art pieces they're bringing in. I was able to work with one of the curators, Bita, again on sort of a YouTube project to kind of reflect on my time there. And so these experiences keep happening even after I left Toronto. And I just really loved that I got to be there for a month, but take the connections and the learning and the thinking and bring it with me today as I step into museums, as I talk about my heritage, as I, go on Instagram and see pieces of art. It just all ties back to my experience at the Aga Khan Museum and how much fun I had. So I definitely recommend this to so many different types of people, whether you love art, you want to learn more about the Middle East, you want to spend a month in Toronto. It's an incredible opportunity. It changed my path at Williams, and I am so thankful for the program and all that it did. So yeah, that's my time at the Aga Khan Museum.